Let's start today's Dhamma talk with a sutta reading. This sutta is from the Samyutta Nikaya. It's called the Simile of the Mountain. At Savatthi, King Pasenati of Kosala sat to one side, and the Buddha said to him, "So, great king, where are you coming from in the middle of the day?" "Sir, there are anointed aristocrat kings who are infatuated with power and obsessed with greed for sensual pleasures. They have attained stability in the country, occupying a vast conquered territory. Today I have been busy fulfilling the duties of such kings." "What do you think, great king? Suppose a trustworthy and reliable man were to come from the east. He'd approach you and say, 'Please, sir, you should know this. I come from the east. There I saw a huge mountain that reached the clouds, and it was coming this way, crushing all creatures. So then, great king, do what you must.' Then a second trustworthy man approached and said, 'Please, sir, you should know this. I come from the south. There I saw a huge mountain that reached the clouds, and it's coming this way, crushing all creatures. So then, great king, do what you must.' Should such a dire threat arise, a terrible loss of human life, when human birth is so rare, what would you do?" And so too, the king meets messengers from the other directions, altogether from the north, south, east, and west. "Sir, what could I do but practice the teachings, practice morality, do skillful and good actions? Then I tell you, great king, I announce to you, old age and death are advancing upon you. Since old age and death are advancing upon you, what would you do? So what can I do but practice the teachings, practice morality, doing skillful and good actions? Sir, there are anointed aristocrat kings who are infatuated with power and obsessed with greed and sensual pleasures. They have attained stability in the country, occupying a vast conquered territory. Such kings engage in battles of elephants, cavalry, chariots, or infantry. But there is no place, no scope for such battles when old age and death are advancing. In this royal court, there are ministers of wise counsel who are capable of dividing an approaching enemy by wise counsel. But there is no place, no scope for such diplomatic battles when old age and death are advancing. In this royal court, there is abundant gold and bullion stored in dungeons and towers. Using this wealth, we can pay off an approaching enemy. But there is no place, no scope for such monetary battles when old age and death are advancing. When old age and death are advancing, what can I do but practice the teachings, practice morality, doing skillful and good actions?" That's so true, great king, that's so true. When old age and death are advancing, what can you do but practice the teachings, practice morality, doing skillful and good actions? That is what the Buddha said. Then the Holy One, the teacher, went on to say, "Suppose there were vast mountains of solid rock touching the sky, drawing in from all sides and crushing the four quarters. So too, old age and death advance upon all living creatures, aristocrats, Brahmins, merchants, workers, outcasts, and scavengers. They spare nothing. They crush all beneath them. There's nowhere for elephants to take a stand, nor chariots, nor infantry. They can't be defeated by diplomatic battles or by wealth. That's why an astute person, seeing what's good for themselves, being wise, would place faith in the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha. Whoever lives by the teaching in body, speech, and mind is praised in this life and departs to rejoice in the heavens." Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It's now 2025 and it looks like a bumper year. A year full of turmoil. Things probably aren't going to be getting any better in the world anytime soon. January 2025 is a very special month for a particular reason. Things are happening in America. Great kings and great presidents, great powerful people are going about their business. What's really amazing about the Buddha's capacity as a teacher is that he's able to connect every event, every happening to the teachings. So often we make this disconnect between what's happening inside the world and the way that we need to practice our sila, samadhi and panya. But from suttas like this, we can see that the Buddha never made that disconnection. He saw a connection and relevance for the Dhamma in everything that we do. So today I'm going to talk about a topic that a lot of people think about these days. Tio Woki. Tiot Woki. Doesn't anybody know what Tiot Woki is? Tiot Woki is something that Malaysians should know because it's an acronym. Malaysians love acronyms. We've got TIMS, we've got RC, we've got MTC. Everything is made into an acronym in Malaysia. Tiot Woki stands for the end of the world as we know it. So actually this is not a new thing. In every age, people are always predicting the end of the world as we know it, or even just the end of the world. It's a very common trope, particularly in Christianity. They're waiting for Jesus to come back and to rule the earth for 1,000 years in justice and peace. But before that, there has to be a great Armageddon. So, of course, these days, there are lots of bad things happening. Climate is unstable. Diseases are rampant. Poverty seems to be growing. Population and resources aren't getting any better. There's possibility of wars. And of course, when there's wars, we tend to use our weapons and we have nuclear weapons. But of course, these sorts of worries, particularly about nuclear war, have been with us for a long time, ever since we invented nuclear bombs. Nothing new whatsoever. These are normal themes in human life. They go all the way back to the time of the Buddha and well before that as well. Human beings have always been fighting wars against each other and hurting each other and bringing about the end of the world as we know it for each other. For after all, even if there's no Armageddon and the whole world gets blown up all at once with quite a lot of nuclear bombs, we still die. And every time we die, that's the end of the world as we know it. We lose all our wealth, we get separated from our family, we have to get reborn in a new place. Sometimes a completely new place. Maybe we've been a human being that we get reborn as an animal, or as a ghost, or even in hell. Or even if we do have the good karma to get reborn as a human being, who knows, you might end up on the opposite side of the world with an unfamiliar family, unfamiliar culture. So, actually, there's no need to fear the end of the world as we know it, because no matter what, it's coming anyway. So people often spend a lot of time being worried about whether or not Donald Trump is going to start World War III, or any other leader. Let's not just pick on Donald Trump. Or whether or not the economy is going to crash, whether or not our real estate investments and our share portfolio is going to do well this year, how our children will be doing, how our grandchildren will be going. So it's really important to know that actually this is not a special age whatsoever. And so you don't need to be particularly worried about these things. The message is actually you should always be worried about these things. And use the worry so that you do and enact a real solution to these problems. Because the problem is actually just old age, illness and death. So for example, if there's war or there's a plague or there's a famine, it's still old age, illness and death, all right? It's just the difference between a peaceful time and a wartime is that in war times, people get old age, illness and death all at once. But in peaceful times, people have it at separate times. But it's still the same problem. So this is why when the Buddha talking to King Pasenadi about all the power struggles of kings, brings up straight away to King Pasenadi the idea of these four mountains coming from all sides. So imagine we closed up this room and then the room started to get smaller and smaller and smaller, second by second. And you could feel it. You could feel with each passing second, your life is getting closer and closer to an end. And eventually you will be crushed. Or another simile is the simile of the fish in little water. So imagine you're a fish in a pond and it's drought, there's no rain, there's no inflow, there's no spring to the pond. And because it's sunny and there's no clouds, the water is running out and you're a fish inside that water. Every single day your space and your resources are declining and you know that the end is coming. So we shouldn't be particularly worried about the end of the world because that problem's always been there for us. Ever since we were born, it's been a real problem for us. We're going to die. And every single day, the moment we come out of the womb, we're getting closer and closer to our death. So you shouldn't be worried about the fact that it's going to happen. What you should be concerned about is whether or not you have a solution to the problem. Yeah? And luckily, as Buddhists, we're very, very fortunate, born to an age where the Buddhist teaching still exists. There are still good members of both the Sangha and the lay community who understand the Buddha's teaching. We have a solution to the problem of death, to the problem of old age, sickness, injury, and death. We have the problem of suffering solved. It's an incredible thing to live in a Buddha's age. So the solution given inside the sutta is that, well, if you know that you're going to die, and you know that you're going to be reborn somewhere else in accordance with your karma, then in the face of all catastrophe, all kinds of old age, injury, illness, and death, the most sensible thing to do is to live a good life, a life of sila, doing good deeds, being generous, practicing meditation, practicing the Brahma Viharas, meditating on universal love, developing your samadhi even further, practicing insight, developing your wisdom, going through high and high realms, and eventually attaining nibbana. That way, the problem of old age, illness, and death is something you're actually working on. Yeah? So actually, when there's a problem and you know they're doing something effective every single day to solve that problem, the problem's not really a problem anymore. The problem's not stressful. You know? Instead of becoming a source of anxiety and fear, the problem actually becomes a source of meaning in your life. The suffering doesn't cause you to worry or to fret, but the suffering just makes you feel strong because it means, okay, I can do something about my life. I can do something about my suffering. And you become a great source of inspiration and hope for everybody around you because most people are living their life with lots and lots of fear. You don't need to be a perfect person. You don't need to be a fully enlightened Buddha or even an Arhat to live a life of inspiration, of fearlessness and hope. All you need to do actually is to face the problems that you have directly and ask yourself whether or not you have a real solution that you can work on every single day. A solution that's actually practicable. It's not a solution that's so hard that only special people can do it. Yeah? But a solution that ordinary people just like you can enact. So what's the first step in that? Well, of course, let's clean up our sila. We do the 5 precepts. Today I forgot to do the 5 precepts with you, but we'll do it at the end of the talk. But whether or not you take the precepts with a monk, yeah, of course the principle is still there. If you understand karma and rebirth, then whether or not you do the formal ceremony with us, you still have motivation to do it. And then, on a practical level, the way to live a good life is to also live a life of generosity and contentment. So sila is all about not hurting other beings. And by not hurting others, we don't hurt ourselves. By giving protection to others, we give protection to ourselves. But generosity goes further than just not hurting others, but actually helping others. and then being content with our own material things so that we've got more time, energy, and resources to help others. And then the third arm of living a good life is to live a life of universal love, a life of Brahma Vihara, of metta, mudita, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, of universal care, universal compassion, universal appreciation, and universal equanimity. These are all things that every single person can do straight away. We can choose not to kill. The moment a mosquito comes and bites us, and there's a lot of mosquitoes in Malaysia, we can choose not to kill it. And already we're moving in the direction of a good life. And immediately we can get a sense from not doing that there's nothing for us to fear. Not just in terms of what happens to us after we die, but the fact that we're living a good life gives us psychological protection and resilience when things get bad in this life. So who knows? Maybe another COVID epidemic will come. Maybe wars will come. Maybe the economy will crash. Maybe the climate will change drastically. Who knows? Those are things that we can't predict. But what we can control and what we can predict is the way that we choose to respond to these things psychologically. So the first thing in terms of having a positive outlook towards all kinds of crisis and difficulty is knowing that you have a solution that you can work on today for these problems. So what's the worst that can happen to you, right? You can die. But if you're living a good life, that's actually not a problem. As this sutta says, you just pass on and go to heaven. And the heavens are much, much better than anything that we have in this world. Except perhaps it may be harder to practice in the heavens because there's not enough suffering to motivate us to keep on practicing. But if you've got right view, if you're a stream enterer, if you pass into the heavens, there's no problem. So please keep that in mind. Think about death. Yeah? But don't think about it in a morbid way. Think about it in a really positive way. Yeah? You're going to die, and then there's something after you die. You get reborn. And if you're practicing the Buddha's teachings of being good through sila, through chaga and brahmavihara, that is through your precepts of ethical restraint, through your generosity and your contentment, and through your practice of meditation, of universal love and cultivation of universal love, then you have nothing to fear whatsoever. And the more you practice, the more you invest your faith, your understanding, and your skillfulness into these things that you can do every single day, the higher up you go in the heavens. Or if you want to get reborn in this world to practice in really good conditions, then the better family you get reborn into in terms of practice. You get reborn to a stable, loving Buddhist family. So none of that work is ever wasted. Do you know that feeling sometimes when you go to work? Or most of you are retired, but when you went to work, or at least when you're working for Tim's and for the MTC. Yeah, sometimes there are days where you think, oh, is this worth it? Maybe not with the Tim's and the MTC stuff, but at least when you go to the office, yeah, where the boss isn't so nice, the motivations of the colleagues don't seem to be going in the right direction, and you wonder to yourself, oh gosh, is this worth it? Am I wasting my time? And so it gives you a sense that your life isn't really going anywhere. But when you're working on the Buddha Dhamma, even with a little thing, like not killing the cockroach when it comes into the kitchen, or not taking a piece of paper from the office without permission, or telling a little lie about whether or not you took the garbage out last night, you can feel that every bit of work that you put into the Buddha Dhamma is going somewhere good, guaranteed. Yeah? You can't do that with money, right? Because you can make money and then there's inflation. You can make money and then the economy can crash. You can make money and then there's nothing to buy in the shops. But you can be guaranteed, because the Buddha promised, that every time you choose to avoid making bad karma and make good karma instead, that is going somewhere good. That's going to benefit you directly. You're going to receive return somehow in terms of pleasure and happiness. And that way you can live every single moment of your life with a great sense of hope, meaning and joy, no matter how hard things get. Even if, this is a teaching from the Buddha actually, you are to be tied down by bandits. And they were to bring out a two-handled saw. That's a saw so big, it needs two people to operate it, one man on each side, so it's got two handles. And they start to saw off your limbs and torture you. The Buddha said that you must practice to not be angry, or else you're not practicing his teaching. Seems like a little bit of a high standard, right? But actually it's a very, very hopeful teaching. Because what else can you do in that situation? Yeah? So you ask yourself always, what can I do? You always have a proactive attitude towards your life. So even when you're tied down by bandits and you're trapped and they're sawing off your limbs, you can do something about that situation for your own benefit and for the benefit of anybody who's watching or who knows about it later. That you chose to do everything that you could to not get angry. And every effort that you made as you're being tortured led towards heaven. And then you die after you bleed to death. And then you spend 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years in some of the highest heavens. Or you get reborn as an extraordinary, strong, beautiful, stable, reliable, wise human being to practice the Dhamma and to become an Arahat as soon as possible. So please don't lose hope. I recommend not looking at the news too much anyway, but if you do look at the news every once in a while, don't lose hope. It doesn't matter actually what the world is doing. You can always choose to live a good life and thus build up the conditions you need to have a good future. And furthermore, you can encourage the people around you to do the same thing. Last talk I talked about troubleshooting in our practice. Now, one of the problems that we often face is that it's hard to practice the Dhamma alone. And we feel like it would be nice if we could practice at least with our whole family. Yeah? So it's good to have the people at Tim's, but of course we're not always at Tim's. We have to spend time with our family. And we wonder to ourselves, how could we actually bring our family towards the Buddha Dhamma so that everybody could support each other to live good lives? The problem here, the reason why families these days in the modern world are falling apart is actually that we don't have religion. It's religion that holds people together. Because people will only stay together if they're working together for a common goal using common methods. So that's why the new community in the modern world is the office or the factory. You spend more time together with people and you know the people at the office better than your own family because you have to work with them. And it's by working with people day after day you get to know their real personality. And you also are motivated to somehow get along with them in order to get the work goals completed. So what religion is meant to do is give us a common purpose to work for in life, which is to get protection from the problem that we all have, death. And to work together to solve that problem using the resources that we all have, our body, speech, and our mind. So you actually can't cooperate with everybody for work because different companies have different goals and they're competing against each other. And you also can't work with everybody because in order to work for certain companies, you need to have certain skills and certain resources. But the thing about Buddhism is that everybody can work together because everybody has a body, everybody has a voice, and everybody has a mind. And everybody can work together because we've all got the same problem. We suffer we go through old age, illness, injury, and death. So this is actually the best way to unify families or any group whatsoever. But the first thing actually to make things easier as Buddhists is to unify our families. There's this taboo in many cultures, particularly Chinese culture, against talking about death. And then in Western culture these days as well. So these days in Malaysia we're a combination of both, so it's double trouble. You're not supposed to talk about death, it scares people. Or you're not supposed to talk about the possibility of the end of the world as we know it, it scares people. But as you can see from this talk, it doesn't have to be scary. Yeah? It can actually be a way for us to come together because it's a problem that we all have. And it's a real problem. It's only a problem to talk about problems if you don't have a solution. But once you've got a solution to the problem, it's really great to talk about the problem because everybody goes, oh, thank God. Yeah? Or thank Buddha. I've been wanting to talk about this for such a long time. But nobody else seemed to want to talk about it. Yeah? So please remember that the Buddha's teachings have many, many different levels. And at the beginning levels, it's simple enough for everybody to get involved. That is, we're all going to die and we can all solve that problem, at least quite well, if not completely, by just understanding karma and rebirth. Yeah, so it's not a complete solution because you get reborn and reborn and reborn, and you could get reborn into hell one day if you're lazy in your practice. But at least it's a pretty good temporary solution to just introduce to the people that you love the idea that we can solve this fear of death that we all have by just understanding that the Buddha's teaching about karma and rebirth is real. The Buddha wasn't a liar and he was no fool. He did his research. He sharpened his psychic powers through his meditation, through his practice, way beyond any person or any God in the universe. What he understood is well beyond anything that any scientist with their telescopes and their microscopes know today. None of those people, none of those experts today can solve for you the problem of death. That's why in the modern world people won't talk about death. But it's a really casual thing for Buddhists because we've got a solution. We can live with hope every single day. We can live with a great sense of self-esteem that we've got a solution to this problem which most other people don't have. And that other people think they've got a solution. There are many teachings in this world about what happens after death, and honestly, they're not very well-researched solutions. Essentially, what we want to do is work with others to build something. So when you're working with other people, the most important thing to build actually is not material things, but culture. When you've got strong, healthy culture, people share with each other, and so you don't need many material things. So monks are the best example of this. We share everything that we have so that we don't really need that much of our own personal stuff. This model can be applied to the lay life. And what you'll find is that if you work together with your family on the common project of let's keep each other safe from death, let's all help each other attain the heavens or good human rebirth, so that we don't need to be afraid of death, so that we can be sure that we've got a good future waiting for us, then you'll find that people want to cooperate with each other and they want to share with each other. And the more you do this, the closer you get to other people and the more you can love them, the more you can practice your Brahma Viharas. And as your Brahma Viharas grow, the power of your mind grows, and you find yourself, when you're talking to even random strangers about the Buddha's teachings, about the benefits of the precepts, the benefits of generosity and contentment, the benefits of practicing universal love, people actually want to listen. You can even talk about death, the thing that most people just won't talk about, and people really want to listen. So actually this problem of there not being enough Buddhists in the world, that's something we can solve as well. Yeah? There are so many things that people think that we can't solve, whether it's the end of the world, having good political systems, curing economies, fixing our families, that actually get solved quite quickly if we just think about the power of the teaching of karma and rebirth. So with all of that in mind, let's now take the 5 precepts so that we can reaffirm our ability to keep the precepts until you take them again. And thus make good karma, avoid making bad karma, live a good life here and now, and then get reborn to a good place after you die. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.